couple weeks ago, I put out a review, mini review actually, of the Nintendo Switch 2. And I'm actually going to follow that up with a game I have been playing quite a lot on it. I just pretty much very nicely tied the bow on the DLC campaign for this game as well. And that is going to be Cyberpunk 2077. I'm going to keep this review of the game. This is the Switch 2 edition strictly. I'm going to keep the review of this edition very short. There's going to be no direct talking points here, so I'm just going to touch on things I think a lot of people are really wondering about without really diving into a ton of little meticulous details. So number one is going to be the graphics. I'm actually going to be real. I played in the graphical mode the entire time, not the, I play a quality mode, basically, as it's called. And I am going to be real. I did not particularly notice any huge frame rate dips. The game did not run at 60 frames per second consecutively, and that could be a huge problem for a lot of people, and I understand that. However, for the most part, it consistently ran between 45 to 50, and I'm completely fine with that for how good the game looked. However, I am going to be a little honest here. During the Phantom Liberty parts of the game did not particularly run very well in areas like Dogtown that have a lot of shit happening. Not even NPC-wise, but when there's just a lot of things going on at once, like weather effects and particle effects and such. The game, that was the only place I noticed it really struggled, and I felt as though they didn't really bother optimizing this part of the game for the Switch 2. But that's just my personal opinion. Number two is going to be gameplay wise. We're going to talk about this. If you are going to play this game on the Switch 2, I heavily suggest getting a Pro controller, whether that be a Switch 1 or a Switch 2 one. There are plenty of Pro controller alternatives out there for the Switch 1 for cheap if you're not willing to spend about $90 for a Switch 2 Pro controller, which I totally understand as well. Pricing is a huge issue with this console for a lot of people, and I think that is a completely valid and fair point. Now, I played on my Switch 1 Pro controller because I actually have not been able to find a Switch 2 one. And I purchased now here's a little embarrassing story to tie into this. When I bought Cyberpunk, I had originally bought an 8-bit Duo controller that was advertised to be working with the Nintendo Switch 2, and found out that it actually wasn't compatible with the system. You had to backdoor firmware onto it in order to make it work. And I think that is really crazy, and that's a big shame on 8-bit Duo for this, shipping a controller like that. But luckily, my Switch 1 Pro controller worked just fine, so I played most of the game with it. The Joy-Cons, while they are fine for things like platformers and such, in my opinion, they don't really work particularly well for first-person shooters. And I just feel like the controls are a little too loose with the Joy-Cons, and you need something a little tighter that's for more precise play. And that's where the Pro controller comes into play here. Let's see. Number three, it has all of the content from the DLC, and it also has been updated to be concurrent with the other versions of the game. That's something a lot of people were worried about too. I noticed online while talking about this game, they were worried that this would be a couple of updates behind, and it is actually not. It is completely up to date with the current versions of Cyberpunk that are on other consoles. And that's really important to me, that it's because I feel like with a lot of games, especially with the Switch 1, and I understand why, a lot of games were held back from their other console counterparts. And I just think that that's an unfair disadvantage to the Switch owner or the Switch 2 owner. And I'm glad that at least with this particular game, that was taken into consideration. And that is an actual thing, that it is actually up to date. I don't have too much more to say about this port. I'm gonna actually run a little comparison from when I played it on the PlayStation 4 back in the day. It runs far better than it did years and years ago when the initial project came out. A lot of people are gonna say, well, yeah, duh, but like, you kind of had to be there when this game came out and played it in its original 1.0 in its original 1.0 version to understand just how much this game has improved in the couple of years it's been out. And honestly, I'm really glad to see that they didn't cut too many corners when it came to the Switch 2 version. Now, I am going to also go ahead and say this. Obviously, if you purchase this game on a PlayStation 5 or your PC, for instance, you're going to get better performance. That is just a factual statement. I'm not going to argue that. But for what you get on the Switch 2, I think the game might be a little pricey. Should have been launched at $50 in my opinion. I think launching at $70 is a little crazy for a game as old as it is. But all in all, I think the Switch 2 port of this game is a solid 7 out of 10. That's my micro review of Cyberpunk 2077 for the Switch 2. And that's really it. Not super detailed or in-depth. The game ran fine for the most part when I was playing it. Yes, there were hiccups here and there. I didn't notice any of these hiccups during combat, which was really, really good. However, like I said, in some of the more intensive areas where a lot of things are happening all at once, like weather effects and such, that was the only time I saw any type of frame rate dipping. That's really it. Again, price point should have been lower, but it is what it is. I would probably recommend waiting until this game goes on sale to purchase it, but I think it is a solid buy for a Switch 2 owner. And it's even more of a solid buy if you only own the Switch 1 and you're coming straight from that to a Switch 2. Because Cyberpunk is a great game, especially all these years later, and I think it is completely worth playing, even with the shortcomings of the Switch 2 version. And with that, I'm actually going to cut the video here. That's really it. Like I said, solid 7 out of 10 port. Nothing super crazy, nothing revolutionary. It's just a solid playable port for Nintendo Switch 2 owners, and I think that's an important thing to have, especially because, unfortunately, we're going to be playing a lot of catch-up with this current gen's systems games because the Switch 1 was so underpowered compared to them. Hit the like button down below if you liked what you saw here. Subscribe button helps me out a lot as well. Leave your comments down below on what your opinion of this version of the game is, or if you're going to buy it. And with that, I'll be cutting the video here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for checking me out.